Hi, everybody. My name's Jamie Selzer, and I'm an occupational therapist for ESU 13. And I'm going to be talking today on this webinar about sensory information and kind of what you can be looking for in your students when it comes to sensory concerns, and then maybe some possible, bring you some possible activities and ideas to help with your student or your child. There might be parents watching this, so maybe activities you can do at home as well. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm gonna just stop my video because I don't like having me up there I feel like that's distracting. So give me one second. There we go. All right, so I titled this A Hidden Piece to Behavior, a Sensory Snapshot, because I do feel like sensory is very much a hidden piece to a lot of behaviors. And it's a piece that we really need to be looking at when it comes to behavior concerns with children. And this is hopefully going to be just 1 hour of your time, and it will give you some good information. So we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so my learning objectives that I would love for you to take away from this today. Participants will have a basic understanding of sensory processing differences and the common sensory types. So there are more than I will talk about today, but I'm going to just hit on the most common ones. And then participants will be able to identify possible sensory differences based on behaviors of your student or child. And then participants will have an understanding of various sensory strategies and activities to help with your children or students. So just a quick overview of sensory processing differences. Basically, sensory processing challenges come when it's an inability to respond appropriately to ordinary experiences. Our brain doesn't process those sensations like maybe typically others do, whether it's lighting in the room that's overstimulating or noises, crowds, things like that. And then, it is a hidden piece because we can't see in that brain and how those sensory channels are working. So that's when we rely on behavior responses to indicate how a person is responding to that information. And then just knowing that sensory differences or challenges in one system can affect other systems. So say if a person's very overstimulated by visual stimuli or auditory stimuli, it can affect their motor planning and their motor function. So they might not be able to walk correctly or motor plan those types of movements. And then some of the common categories I am talking about today are over responsive to sensory stimuli, under responsive, and then those sensory seekers seeking and craving. So I will go into these in more detail here in a second. And then I kind of did some research on the recent studies out there, and they are saying 1 in 6 children can be affected by sensory processing differences. And they could be comorbidities of other related or mental health or autism, but they can also be standalone issues. Sensory processing disorder is not really recognized in our DSM-5, but you do see those diagnoses. And I feel like this is becoming quite an epidemic in our schools and with our children. So I do feel like it's increasing every year. So some sensory type red flags. Under responders, so maybe the kiddos that aren't maybe processing that stimuli, they're just a little more zoned out, withdrawn. They don't have much of an inner drive. They can kind of look more like a couch potato type kiddo. He's, hard to get him engaged or him or her engaged. They're not really interested in exploring their environment. They could be more passive and quiet, withdrawn, difficult to engage in conversation or social interactions. They might get fatigued easily with, even a little bit of activity or a little bit of input. Over responders, they are overstimulated easily. So they may not like to be touched. They might have aggressive or impulsive outbursts just due to that overstimulation and not knowing how to regulate that. They might be irritable, fussy, moody, unsocial. They avoid groups. They may not want to engage in group activities in the classroom or engage with children at a park. They are cautious and they avoid new things. They don't like the idea of not knowing what's going to happen. Maybe more structured. They're very hyper aware of what's going on in their environments. Might ask a lot of questions about their environments, like who's that? What's that noise? Things like that. Very upset by transitions and changes. So really need a lot of preparation for that. They might seem anxious. And then over responders can be picky eaters. So they don't like trying new foods. They kind of stick to some of their favorites, day to day. So a lot of these kiddos are in fight or flight mode a lot of the time. So it can really come off as some major behavior issues going on when really it's a sensory issue. And then sensory seekers and cravers, those are our kiddos that are constantly moving on the go, jumping, running, crashing, pushing, pulling, spinning. They might not have any personal space, always in others' little bubble. They might blur out a lot. They don't wait their turn. They might seem angry and hard to calm down, and very disruptive. So here is some information, behavioral tantrums versus sensory meltdown. So a behavioral tantrum is an outburst that happens when the child, it usually has a function. A child is wanting something or they're needing something. And usually those tantrums stop when they get what they want. So they're very intentional. You want to set, of course, structure, clear boundaries, expectations on these types of kiddos. But then a sensory meltdown is very different. It's a reaction to feeling overstimulated or overwhelmed. And kiddos may not be able to tell you, what they're feeling. But usually it's, that they're overstimulated somehow, or they need some kind of sensory input that they're not getting. So you just want to help kind of look at the environment and figure out, you have to be kind of a detective and figure out what's going on with the kiddo, and try to find what those sensory needs are and what they're trying to get from, or what they're trying to get away from. Because sometimes there's something in the environment that maybe they're wanting to get away from, so they might run out of the room and things like that. So learning those triggers, the best ways to avoid, modify, or adapt their environment. And then, once you do figure out that sensory piece is, getting it implemented regularly into their day. And of course, you want to rule out any kind of medical components like sleeping. That could be a major factor when it comes to behaviors and sensory processing. Gastrointestinal problems, if it's constipation or something going on in their GI tract, allergies, language delays, mental health concerns, any kind of medical component that might be going on. You always want to rule those out also. So I'm not going to go into much detail on this visual, but just showing you how we all need to look at more of a bottom-up approach with behaviors. And as you can see, if you look at that bottom, those fundamental processes, you see sensory there, and it's very much a foundation for all of us. So much like sleep and eating and all those foundational needs we must have to function, sensory is right there with it. And so we really need to look at that. It's very important if we are dealing with children that are just really having a hard time, just trying to have more of a bottom-up approach, because they can't get to this top reasoning and the academic pieces until those basic needs are met. So just really keeping that in mind, the pyramid, as you can see, sensory is right there at the bottom, and it's very much a foundation for our neurocognitive development, and getting to those higher level cognitive thinking and reasoning skills. So a bottom-up approach is kind of a term I got from Dr. Mona Delahook. She has an amazing resource that I have read and I recommend very much. And I will let you know what that is here in a second. It is called Beyond Behaviors. It's a book that you can get off Amazon, and I recommend it very much. It has an amazing take on behaviors and just really has a great perspective and makes you think about how to approach these situations that you have with kids with behavior issues. She just said that many interventions that we use are top down. So, those reinforcements, those timeouts, those social consequences, we just make the assumption that the student can reason and think through their actions and behaviors, when really they cannot. It might be a sensory component, a trauma component, you know, a lot of those types of things. And so we really need to, look more at those foundational pieces and what is going on. Look at the body language and cues of your children, before, during, and after these behavior episodes. If they are showing, like they're in fight or flight mode before these behaviors happen, that means there's something alerting or something that's overstimulating them in their environment that they are not liking. So we just have to be really aware of that body language and those cues. Toxic stress and trauma are very much connected to sensory processing. So just really digging deep into the background of the child, kind of what has gone on, even from when they were really young, when they were 1 years old, or, they might have had a traumatic event or something that caused them a lot of stress and trauma. And we're seeing all these behavior issues. So maybe it's sensory related, trauma related, stress related. So just really kind of looking more from the bottom up on with our kiddos. And I just love this quote: behaviors are a window into a child's nervous system. So just really being able to not just see those behaviors, we just really need to dig deeper into what's going on with our children. So what else should we know and be looking at? what happened before school. So sleep, of course. Is the child getting restful sleep? And then if not, is that being communicated to the school? Communication books are a great tool to have between school and home. And it could really help a teacher guide her day for the student. Like if the student's having a rough morning, they didn't get the breakfast they wanted, or they didn't get the sleep they needed, or something, the medication, they didn't get that day. You really need to guide your demands for the day. So maybe, okay, Johnny did not get his medication, or he did not get good sleep last night. So maybe we not make him do this full math worksheet for the day, or, just really being aware of those demands. And then checking the environment. Can changes be made? The noise, the clutter, the visual stimuli on the walls. A lot of our classrooms do have a lot of visual stimuli on the walls. So how can that be adapted, maybe in a different way, or some of that taken away? Lighting, scents, things like that. And then the attention piece, are cognitive demands too low, or are they too high? Can you alter the task in a different way? Maybe they do half the worksheet instead of the whole worksheet. Do we need more visuals or schedules for their, knowing what's going on in their day or their expectations? And always getting a reinforcement checklist. I think I have one of these in a resource folder I will share with you. But having these filled out, getting the parents' input on what they love, what their interests are, and incorporating those into, academic tests, maybe some non-preferred tests that they are not wanting to do, but how can you motivate that task by using some of their interests, or having a reinforcer at the end of that task? So those are great tools to have. Okay. Sorry, I want to go back. 1 second. Okay. So what else should we know? Should we try to replace stimming types of behaviors? The answer is no, unless they are harmful to themselves or others. So say they're biting their hand and they're making sores. So yes, we want to try to replace that behavior for sure. But these stimming behaviors can really help calm. They're usually doing them, our kiddos are usually doing them as a calming strategy for themselves. So if we take that away, we could really be causing them more harm than we know. So we want to just think about that. They have a function and they help with self-regulation. And then I just wanted to throw this in here is screen time. How much is too much? So this is a great website that kind of tells you what your screen time amount should be for the age of your child. Really, I have a belief that our screen time is causing a lot of these sensory concerns. Kiddos aren't getting out and playing as much, exploring outdoors and exploring their environment. So then they don't get these sensory experiences. So I think it's so important that we review how much screen time we're having, or that our children are having and our students are having, and having that kind of talk with families, just to educate them a little bit more. So this resource is also in the resource folder I will share at the end. All right. So now we'll go into talking about our powerhouse sensory systems. Um, so these are some of our bigger sensory systems that we get a lot of input on. So our proprioception system, one of the it's one of our powerhouse sensory systems, allows us to be aware of our body and space, excuse me, and how we move in our environments, and then how much pressure to apply when completing activities. So, um, kind of like our body in space, our position in space, like even being able to sit our full bodies into a chair, that takes our proprioception system that tells us, okay, you know what, my behind is, square in my chair, my legs are bent, my feet are touching the floor, my back is upright. So that's our proprioception system telling us how our position is in space. Activities that promote or talk about deep pressure or heavy work provide this kind of input. So if you hear your OT say, oh, they need heavy work or they need deep pressure, we are wanting to feed our proprioception system when we talk about those types of activities. So the best, this is in my experience and in a lot of, studies on sensory out there, it is one of the best input. This type of input is one of the best to promote calming behaviors and improve self-regulation. So what do we want to look for if we feel like proprioception, our kiddos may have some differences? And I use the term differences because when you talk about, sensory behaviors or sensory concerns, that's kind of putting a negative connotation on it when I really don't feel like it is, because we all have our own sensory differences. Some of us like to wear certain clothing, or we don't like to go shopping on Black Friday because it's crazy and overstimulating. Um, so we all kind of have those. So that's why I put sensory differences in here. So some of what these might look like are that we're feeling, the kiddo or the student or your child might be clumsy, falling out of the chairs, um, halfway on the chair, not really knowing that, they're about to fall out of their chair, leaning on things, desks, walls, or people. They might not be aware of personal space. So they're in your face or in your bubble. They're applying too much pressure or too little pressure when like writing, um, closing doors, moving chairs. They might be excessively affectionate physically. So they might want a lot of squeezes, hugs, or massages because they're wanting that deep pressure input. They might stomp and run, jump, crash into walls and people, either not knowing they're doing this or trying to do this to get that feedback, running into others or through groups of people. Tiptoe walking is they're when you see kids doing this, they're most likely trying to get more input through their feet or their legs, ankles. So you want to try to fix this because that can lead into issues down the road. W sitting is another one. A lot of kiddos feel like they have a better base of support when they're W sitting, and maybe looking for more feedback. So they W sit. And so that really needs to be corrected because that can cause significant orthopedic issues down the road. They might chew on a lot of items, mouth items, to get more feedback in their jaw area. And then stuffing too much food in their mouth, just trying to get more feedback also in their mouth and their jaw, their oral area. So those are some things to look for. And then these are some activities to help that maybe you could try to get them more feedback this way. Joint compressions, weighted items like a vest. They have so many weighted blankets out there now, which is awesome. You could try a burrito wrap in a blanket, trampolines, running, long walks, obstacle courses, chair push-ups and wall push-ups are great to teach kiddos to do at their desk or in their classroom independently. Heavy work, so carrying items in the hallway. I have a couple of students that do that to kind of help with those transitions, but also to provide, it's like their sensory activity. And part of their sensory diet plan is to carry heavy items, and it also helps with transitions and maybe some more behaviors that you might see during those unstructured transition times. Just having them carry like a heavy basket with their books or their folders or whatever they're needing for class time. And then, or carrying, the balls, the creative balls to PE or, things like that. Stacking chairs is a great task to have. Cleaning the whiteboards, that takes some good deep pressure through the arms. And wiping those off, tunnel crawling, passing the weighted ball around the circle, like for little ones at your little calendar time, body socks and stretchies. I'll show you what a stretchies is later in this presentation, but it's like that neoprene type of fabric, and the kids can get in it and stretch around. It provides great sensory feedback or proprioceptive feedback. Scooter board games. So if they want to lay on them on their tummy and they can push themselves, that gets good feedback through the arms and legs. Resistance bands, of course, those TheraBands that you can use for exercises. Kiddos can do those. Blowing bubbles and using straws when drinking. This provides that good proprioceptive feedback to the jaw, to the oral area. And like I said before, this is a great sensory input to help that fight or flight mode, to help improve sensory self-regulation. So move on to the next one. Okay, vestibular system. So this tells us if our body's moving and what direction and are we moving fast or slow? And then movement activities help with regulating our vestibular system. These can be calming or alerting for children. So, of course, what will we be looking for if we feel like the kiddo needs more vestibular input? Constant movement, fidgeting, running, spinning, and standing. So pretty much the kiddos are just in constant motion is usually a good sign. They might avoid if you have like an over responder, that means they get overstimulated too easily by movement. So they might actually avoid playground equipment and have a fear of movement or being off the ground. So you do want to try to ease them into this because, we just want our kiddos to kind of desensitize themselves from these fears and give them more sensory experiences. So maybe that eventually they will get over these avoidances. They might be easily car sick or motion sick. They might hate car seats. Might have a baby that constantly screams or a toddler that constantly screams in their car seat. They like to spin or do fast-paced movement. They might bump into things or people. They might seem clumsy or have poor coordination. They might do a lot of rocking in their chairs or on the floors or while standing. So some activities to help with this area. Good vertical movement. It's the most regulated plane of movement. I wouldn't say no spinning, but spinning, just knowing spinning can cause some dysregulation. So it just really needs to be monitored. You don't want the kiddo to sit there in the spinny chair and spin and spin and spin and spin, and then you're wondering why they're just off the wall. It can cause more dysregulation. So just monitoring that. Jumping, Of course, trampolines are great, bouncing on little hoppy balls, hopping on their feet. Adaptive seating, seeing a lot more of this in the classroom, so that's super exciting because it's a great tool for a lot of kiddos. You know, there's all sorts out there right now, and you can even like have them stand to do their schoolwork, inverting the head, so hanging upside down and the monkey bars maybe for a little bit, or have them lay upside down on your couch. This can be very beneficial to the brain, of course, in small doses. It could really help organize our sensory systems and our nervous systems. Prone extension on the floor, so that just means laying on their tummy or on the scooter board, can help promote regulation. Our full body flexion, so maybe getting into a ball or doing a child pose, incorporating some yoga into classrooms or at home. Okay, some alerting activities. So kind of going along with vestibular, but I just wanted to throw out some overall alerting activities for our under responders. Okay. So some movement activities, skipping, running, jumping, getting the whole class involved, just a great overall sensory break. Outdoor play, of course, is the best. Relay races, obstacle courses, bouncing on a therapy ball, some vibration to the arms, cool temperatures, cool items to the face, or just having a cold water bottle at the desk or available for kiddos. Upbeat music, of course, is alerting, wall push-ups, fidget, sensory bins with rice and other alerting medias. So like water, there's all sorts out there, maybe some slime or water beads or things like that. So those are great tools. Crunchy and chewy snacks are alerting. Hard and tart candies, of course, are alerting. So those are a few ideas. Whoopsie. All right, another one of our powerhouse systems is the tactile system. So how we process touch information in our body. This is, of course, extremely important for sensory processing because everything we do or we're touching. And then many individuals do have tactile symptoms. They might be defensive with touch, or they might be under responsive and want to touch everything. So it's really a foundational system with sensory integration. So tactile differences might look like our resistance to touch or hugs or cuddling. They might prefer to touch rather than be touched. So they need that control over, over touching. They might be distressed by haircuts and nails being clipped and teeth brushed. They might avoid having their hands dirty, playing in paint and other types of media. They'll have a higher low pain tolerance, resistance to certain types of clothing. So jeans versus sweatpants, t-shirts, long sleeves. And they might be very picky eaters. So they avoid certain textures of foods. And they might gag or vomit in response to foods. So activities to help with tactile is slow introductions and desensitization to sensory play. So maybe instead of putting their finger in the paint, we could put the paint in a little baggie and have them touch it that way. Just trying to give them still that experience, but just slow introductions to those types of things, or using a spoon to play in sand instead of their fingers, or something like that. Brushing programs. So This is a program using a specific surgical type brush, and you brush arms and legs and back and shoulders. And it's a protocol that you need to be trained on, and it needs to be supervised by an OT or somebody that is certified in it. So, or just has had the training on it. So it's great program, but you just need to make sure that you have somebody that's been trained on it to oversee the program. Joint compressions, of course, and deep pressure activities are good for tactile sensory. So if you're going to do some maybe tactile sensory activities, maybe doing some deep pressure or joint compressions to the hands and arms would be a good activity to do prior to those kind of experiences. Slow introductions to different types of foods and textures. I mean, I could do a whole webinar on picky eating and sensory. So that takes some time. A lot, you see a lot of picky eating these days. And I just tell my families that it's a work in progress. It takes time. It shouldn't be a stressful situation unless, you know, the kiddo's like really more of a problem eater, then you might need to get some feeding therapy. But, you know, you just want to include them in food preparation and cooking and baking just to kind of increase their exposure to different types of foods in a positive way. So you always want to make it very positive and never a stressful situation with eating. Of course, you want to prepare or ask this kiddo that maybe doesn't like hugs if, you know, can I give you a hug? Can I give you a high five? You know, things like that. So you want to always ask them for those types of things. Deep pressure touch and squeezes, again, can be good. Hand or other massagers, vibrating pins are good for sensory input. As babies, you know, get those touch and feel books out and let the babies and the toddlers feel all those different types of textures. Sensory bins, again, are a great tactile tool. And you want to kind of start with like more of a very mild type of media. So maybe like lentils, like those beans. Lentils is a very smooth, very calming texture, as in rice might be more alerting. So you kind of want to start on the low end of that. Sensory bags and having to feel for objects with occluded vision. So can they stick their hand down in a bag and pull out a bell or a ball, or when you have other items in there, just kind of improving their tactile sensory input and identification. So Interoception System is another big one of our powerhouse system. So this one is kind of a newer-ish system. We're kind of starting to learn more and more about it, and it's really interesting. You know, this is related to our internal organs and gives us the ability to feel what is happening in our bodies and how we can identify those internal cues. Like, oh, you know, my stomach's rumbling, I must be hungry, or my bladder's full, I need to use the restroom. So identifying those internal organ feelings and being able to act on them. So it's very much a hidden sense. You know, like I said, it helps detect those responses of hunger and thirst and sickness and heart rate and other systems. It's, again, another foundational system for helping with self-regulation. Gives us the ability to read our own physical signals related to emotions and how we are feeling. So I have a handout included in our resource folder at the end I will show you, but this is a great handout from Kim Clary. She's an OT who is also on the autism spectrum, and she survived an eating disorder, and so she has some great tools and resources I'll share with you later. What sensory differences look like in the area of interoception? So those pain tolerance levels, if you have a kiddo that has a really high pain tolerance, they are obviously struggling with those interoceptors and recognizing that signal. They might be having difficulty like communicating what they're feeling, sickness or if something hurts. So then you see some behaviors come out of this because they are unable to read those cues that our body's giving them. So they might act out or do some other things. They might have difficulty with potty training. So they don't understand what that heavy bladder feeling is and how to help that. Or it might take their bladder getting excessively full and before they're, oh, I got to go potty and it's too late, so they might have a lot of difficulty with that potty training piece. And then, of course, you see the aggression, the outbursts, inappropriate laughing, smiling. You might see emotional shutdown just because they can't recognize their responses to emotions. So a lot of self-regulation difficulties. So activities that can help, helping to just increase awareness to sensations and feelings. There's this feelings log I'll share with you. And I've also recently attended an interoception training. And I would very much recommend everybody kind of go through that training because it's really eye-opening, and it would be a great tool to incorporate in the classroom when you're doing your social emotional classroom work or curriculums, because it really helps, increase kids' awareness of sensations and what this feels like. And they have to draw self-portraits and help identify, what hurts, what part of the body hurts. But also helping individuals to notice the sensation, give meaning to that. So, if somebody says my tummy hurts, what does that feel like? That might mean you're hungry, and kind of helping them learn those sensations and kind of what their responses should be and what their strategies should be. So now we'll talk about basic sensory systems. So our visual system, it's responsible for processing our visual stimuli and exploring our environments. Differences look like, sensitivity to light. Maybe they're over interested in lights and like flip the switches off and on. Visual perceptual difficulties such as reading, scanning the environment, finding hidden picture objects. So they are too overstimulated by maybe a lot of visual input. They might like to watch objects spin or light up, run into people or objects often, get close to TVs and screens, easily distracted or bothered by environments with a lot of visual stimuli, and hard to complete tasks or worksheets that have a lot of things to look at. And then some activities, of course, those light filters we're seeing all over are great because fluorescent lighting is no good. And so it's nice to have those light filters to dim the lights. And then offering our sunglasses, hoods, hats, partitions to some of our kiddos that might struggle with this. Really being weary of putting too much on your classroom walls, or having stuff hang from the ceilings, art projects or what have you. because that can really be overstimulating for kids. Limit busy worksheets and tasks with a lot of items to look at. So if you have a student that might be struggling with attention or visual stimuli, just kind of trying to break up those tasks and those worksheets, covering parts of it so they can just work on little sections at a time. Seat placement away from entrances and exits. Tinted glass lenses or colored overlays can really help. There's all sorts of different colored overlays out there. So just finding a color that maybe suits your student best and maybe help them. These can really help improve reading and visual perceptual difficulties. And then just practicing those visual perceptual activities such as I Spy, mazes, hidden pictures, just giving them a lot of practice with that and helping kind of desensitize them a little bit. Auditory system, of course, how we process sound, volume and pitch of sound, very important in development of communication and social skills. So differences may look like student or children may run out of the room due to a noise, covering their ears, bothered by ordinary noises. So maybe the humming of the fluorescent lights, we may not be able to hear that, but they can. And it's a huge problem. Seems to hear noises others don't. Talks loudly or softly, unaware of their volume control. So just kind of teaching them some of those things. Easily distracted by noises. They don't respond to certain noises or their name being called. They might startle easily, make noises to themselves, and some language delays. So activities to help. Noise canceling headphones. If you have a kiddo covering their ears or even making noises to themselves, try noise canceling headphones because they might work. A lot of people, it also might amplify them singing to themselves or talking to themselves, but it's worth a shot. Because sometimes when they're making noises to themselves, they're drowning out noise that maybe they're hearing that is bothering them. So they're making their own noises. Quiet space to calm down or do work, calming music or alerting music, preparation by adult of loud noise. So like preparing them for those fire drills, tornado drills, the gym buzzers that go off during games. Sound machines could be a great tool to help calm like white noise, allow control over the noises that are happening. So if you're in music class and you're wanting to play something on your projector, just having them come up and control that noise so that it's not bothersome for them. Allow for seating preferences away from noise. And then just helping with that desensitization. So increments of time. So if music class is really a big problem, try to make them, build up their time in there. So they start with, you got to go stand in the back of the music class for 3 minutes and then we'll go, or then building up that time, 5 minutes and so on and so forth. So olfactory and gustatory, our sense of smell, our sense of taste. So our sense of smell, kids might be hyper aware of smells in the room. They might be very sensitive to perfumes, candles, and other scents. So really being wary of what you're wearing. If you have a kiddo, struggles with sensory issues, be wary of the own scents you're using or those scented lotions you might be using, because that can really be disruptive for them. They might smell everything, they eat or touch. Certain smell sensitivities can cause nausea and headaches. So just being aware of that piece. Gustatory, you might see kiddos chew on a lot of things or mouth a lot of things, a lot of non-food items. They might be a picky eater. So activities to help with sensory differences in smell, essential oil scents on cotton balls. And you could put them in little squeeze bottles and they could have those at their desk and just kind of squeeze and smell. Vanilla and lavender are usually calming scents. Peppermint and citrus are alerting. There's all sorts of like scented markers and pencils and stickers out there. If you have a kiddo that maybe is motivated by these types of things or just needs that sensory input, having those available for him or her. Area of taste, just exploring different textures and flavors. Start small, never force bites. Having popsicles and suckers, gum, hard candies, sweet and sour. And then just exploring different temperatures of food can also help. So now we will talk about some sensory diet plans. So I just want to say, you want to make sure your OT is involved with any kiddo that you feel has sensory issues, or if they're having behaviors, is try to get your OT involved to help you, fill out the sensory checklist forms, identify those needs, and then help with setting up a sensory diet plan. So it's an individualized, so I have that bolded because it's very individualized. And so we have to get the proper information in order to set up these plans. But basically they're sensory rich activities that are meaningful and help to meet those specific sensory needs. So it helps to, they help to increase participation, success in the school and the home. You don't necessarily need like a super big swing in your classroom or these fancy equipment you see. There's ways to go around that and to still meet sensory needs for kids. And it's not a reward. It should be implemented regardless of the student's behavior. It should not be taken away if the student is not having a good day. This is a very much needed plan that needs to be incorporated into their day. I don't usually set up activities to happen at the same time every day. I want the teacher to read their child and figure out, okay, we need a sensory break right now. Or if you know that math work is a struggle, a sensory break ahead of that or before that would be a good plan. If I said, oh, Johnny needs to take a sensory break at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, maybe at 10 o'clock, he is like working his little hiney off, doing his math work, and he's doing a great job and he's engaged and he's participating. You don't want to interrupt that and say, oh, we got to go we got to take a sensory break. So I'm very much not a stickler to say, hey, we got to have, these set times, but just know they need to be consistent. They need to happen routinely. So use your child's behavior as a guide when they need it. Of course, you want to be proactive. You don't want to wait until they've had a major escalation of behavior and then go take a sensory break. You want to try to take it before that happens. So always involve the student in their activities, give them a choice. Ask them, what do you think would help you right now? Do you need to take a walk? Do you need to go jump? Do you need to go swing? So they kind of learn that self-regulation strategy, like they're learning what helps them. So there's a couple different ways I do these kind of plans, and I'll show you in a second. I do say they should happen at least every, it really depends on your kid. That's why it's so important to have your OT involved. I say should happen at least every hour, 2 hours for 2 to 5 minutes per activity. So they don't have to be, it's just like that transition basket. We have the basket during transitions, and transitions are very quick, but they're meeting that sensory need. So the effects, of those short activities can last several hours for a kid. Of course, it's very dependent on the child, but that's just what that short little activity, how that can, be such a, great thing for these kids. It's meeting the activity and it can get them through the day. Consistent routine, they should be proactive, not reactive. Please don't take them away. Trial and error process, of course, one thing that works one day might not work the next. But please don't give up on those strategies. Try them again, the next week or the next day. And I'm a big proponent of recess for our sensory students. Please don't take recess away. Can we come up with some different consequences other than taking that recess away for these kiddos that need sensory breaks? So here are a few formats. So on this first one, it's just a key ring that can be taken wherever that student goes, and it's got different choices on there. And then here is one where it's like their morning arrival. Okay, they get to bounce, do some animal walks and swing. During reading, maybe they get a break. They do reading first, and they get a break in between. Take a break, go for a walk. Before math, they get a scooter board or body sock. You can either make these choices, or this is kind of their structure of their sensory break. They first do scooter board, then body sock, then joint compressions. So these are just a few that I have done for students. A lot of these activities can also be incorporated into academic tasks. Hey, can we put their math flashcards on one end of the room and have them use a scooter board to go find the answer that's posted on the other side? Or, how can we incorporate these into their academic skills to make it even more successful for them and fun? Here is a good little general sensory break for our over responders. So some calming type of strategies here. And I have this in the resource folder, so you don't have to hurry and write all these down. So this is just very general. So, you can take this and roll with it with, some of your kids and see if it works. But again, just, maybe going over it with your OT or your therapist provider that's, a little more informed on sensory processing. Here is one for under responders, it says up there. So more alerting activities: jumping, swinging, outdoor play, hopping, hoppy ball, fidgets, scented items, gum, of course, chewy items. So those are more alerting activities. And then our sensory seekers, a lot of movement, a lot of sensory input for these guys. So scented gummy markers, scented markers, gum, chewy items, music, adaptive seating. So these are pretty general. So classroom integration ideas. So these do not sensory, I think a lot of people get stuck on, I don't have the time to do this, or I can't just take them out of class to do this all the time. If you don't have an extra para or adult support in your room and wondering how you can integrate these, let's give our kiddo jobs. Hey, Johnny, you have to stack chairs. Oh, we're erasing whiteboards today. Let's carry the library books back. Sharpen pencils. Play Simon Says with the whole class. Get the whole class involved. Doing yoga. Go noodle. Anything that the whole class can participate in. Doing jumping jacks. Crunchy, chewy snacks are alerting. and help to regain that focus or participation. Jewelry provides great proprioception to the jaw, and the kiddo can just have it hanging around their neck. They make all sorts of types these days: necklaces, bracelets, little pencil toppers. There's all sorts out there that they could just have at their desk. A calm down corner space in the classroom. It does not need to be big. It can just be a little corner that they know they can go to if they need a break. Weighted crates or bins for the transitions. Music breaks, go noodle, brain breaks, chair push-ups at a desk, wall push-ups, flexible seating, standing desks are great for kiddos that just need to stand and do their work. TheraBand or bungee cords around the legs of their chair to help with their feet, kind of fidget with their feet a little bit, and even pulling with their arms to give them some good feedback. Fidgets, transition movement activities. So like animal walks for preschool classrooms that you need to go from calendar time to small group time. Let's walk. Let's hop like a bunny. Weighted items, of course, seeing a lot of these around. Backpacks. If you don't have weighted items, use a backpack and just put some books or things in it to weigh it down a little bit. You always want weighted items to be 10% of the child's body weight. I'll say that again, 10% of the child's body weight. And you don't want to leave this on them all day because their little bodies might fatigue, their little muscles. So, pick the times, the seated work times, maybe to incorporate some of these weighted items. So some great sensory tools to have in your classroom if you're wanting some flexible seating. There is all sorts out there, which is pretty cool. These are the body socks, the neoprene, and here's the stretchies. It's like a little ring that's awesome to stretch in and provide some of that proprioception feedback. These are weighted vests. These are actually weighted compression vests, so it's kind of a 2-in-1. It offers some good compression if kiddos like that or need that. Chewy items, little fidget pad. It's also weighted, but it has, oops, I'll go back there. It also has some little fidgets on it, and easy to make with rice. Look at Pinterest. These are like Theraputty or squeezy balls, trampoline, and a scooter board. And I don't have it on here, but a visual timer is a great tool to have. Okay, so we will go to the sensory resource folder and look that over really quick. I'm trying to keep this around an hour. Okay, so these are the website resources I was telling you about. So Kim Clary, she's an OT and has sensory processing and autism. And this talks about interoception. So here, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this is what she used to learn more about interoception and her own body, her feelings, her emotions, and this really helped her conquer an eating disorder that almost took her life. So it's very interesting. And then we have a sensory chart. So it just kind of goes through over-responsive, interoception types of responses, under-responsive, and discrimination. So difficulty, pinpointing what and where the sensations are in your body. And just some great information on this. It's pretty long, but 10 pages. But just some great tools for you guys to look through. This is the screen time guidelines that you can go to and read through yourself. Let's go, oopsies. Here are those sensory diet plans I have. Here is your PowerPoint slide information, sensory diet activities for children. Here's some classroom sensory strategies toolkit. This has like so many. This is like a 16-page resource, and it goes by fidgeting tools, adaptive seating, self-regulation. So it has so many great ideas. And then here is the sensory diet, just information sheet I wanted to throw in here, and kind of what those are, what they look like, explains more about them. And then this is a great tool to have for home. It goes through each sensory system, what things might look like if your child needs proprioception feedback, and some great ideas that really don't require equipment. So it goes through each sensory system. So this is a great From Tools to Grow website I found a couple of years ago. So that is it for the resource. So I think that concludes my webinar on sensory. So I'm really hoping you learned a lot from this webinar, and you're going to take some things back and roll with them in your classroom or at home, or talk to your OT about any of these ideas or this information, or maybe it kind of opened your eyes to, oh, maybe I need to pursue sensory with this kiddo, or see if this kiddo needs sensory. So I'm just really hoping that this was informative. This is my email address. I am happy to answer any questions you might have. So please feel free to email me with any questions. Here's the resources that I used for this webinar, for some of it. Beyond Behaviors, that's the book I was telling you about, must read. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar, and please reach out to me with any questions. Thank you so much.